Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 5 of our series as part of a science and technology showcase. And we've called this series Pivoting During the Pandemic. Basically, our goal is to find out how to find new revenue sources and diversification strategies and learn what other people are doing and learn from each other to be more agile and flexible and have more options. So I'm really glad to see that everyone's here. I'm continuing to admit people in the waiting room, and I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Our first speaker is Arash Nazhad, and he's Director of Energy Investment Banking at Citi Group. And also then we have Sudhir Pai, Chairman of Technology Collaboration Center. And we also have Sunil Garg of DataVedik, and we have Suri Bhat of Bluware. And today's focus is analytics, and we're going to talk about what people are doing in analytics, how they are pivoting during the pandemic, how they're pivoting during this, some people are calling Double Black Swan event of collapsed oil prices plus the pandemic. I guess we could say triple black swan of something unexpected. Maybe gravity stops working all the time. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, I was trying to think of things that nobody's predicted, and I was kind of mulling that over today. But at any rate, it's really great to be here and glad to see that we have such great participation. I wanted to let you know that we are recording this, and I will make this available. I'll download it and put it on a website. We'll have these available all together in a website on AAPG website that will be sort of archived virtual events. So that will be really nice to have. And I'm hoping to also just kind of expand this so that we incorporate Your Tech and UPitch. UPitch is our program for supporting innovation. And it's something that I'm really proud that we have, and a lot of our board members from UPitch that are participating today. So I'm really happy to see that. And I will be letting you, we'll make it possible for everybody to be in touch with each other too, so that you can share your experiences, and then we'll have at the end of the day, or the end of tonight, we'll have some time for questions and answers and insights. So I would like to start with Arash Nazhad from Citi Group. And if you'd like to start, it would be great to have you talk about what you're seeing happening today, what companies are doing to respond to this very difficult time. So welcome, Arash.
I'll unmute. Thank you, Dr. Nash, for the opportunity. I'll take a minute to just disclaim. Frankly, it's been extremely busy times. I think from as a banker, working with the broad spectrum of industry participants, at the start of this, a black swan, as you call it, double black swan. We spent a lot of time, helping companies with their liquidity. The one big difference in this financial crisis, or this crisis, was that across lending centers in the United States, whether Citi or J.P. Morgan or BAML, these were post financial crisis, were banks that had significant liquidity and had great capital ratios. So. We spent a lot of time with clients, initially helping them figure out, trying to get, their balance sheet shored up. I think over the last several weeks, last couple months, you've seen $65 billion in capital expenditures evaporate from the upstream sector. You've seen about a million barrels a day of production shut-ins that are accounted for, and much more than that. I think, looking back on the day that I had two meltdowns this last 3 months, in full disclosure. It was the day the market collapsed once everyone figured out what COVID was. And the second day was the day we had negative $35 oil. But, saying that, I personally never thought as the rapid change in oil price you'd see. So, we're now again at a $30 to $40 oil price. And, personally, my view is that, folks aren't going to be as focused on growth and are going to be much more focused on free cash flow and generating free cash flow. And so, when you think about, pivoting during the pandemic, what are some of the opportunities? I think the opportunities are, need to be very much focused on generating returns, opportunities focused on reducing costs, opportunities focused on increasing the efficiencies of upstream companies and service companies, all the great buzzwords that, we hear. It's been extremely busy from another perspective. I would say, you're seeing a lot of discussion around consolidation, whether it's public commentary from the likes of Andrew Gold or Bernard, former executives, everyone's talking about the need for consolidation. So, the first topic, the first area that I think it's interesting is just being involved in M&A and doing a lot of M&A, is, how do you diligence assets remotely, right? So, historically, when you purchase an asset or sell an asset, you need to, go and do a site visit as some part of that, process, whether in the generally in the second round, but sometimes in the first round. One thing that I think is very cool is, how do you remotely diligence and do a site visit? So, is that drone technology? Is that some sort of video technology? But, a lot of transactions are going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years, because we do need to consolidate, reduce costs, concentrate assets, increase efficiencies to generate returns so that this sector becomes investable again for the public markets. So, one area I think you're going to see a lot more activity is a very small sector but it's one that I have personal experience with is remote diligence and drone technology, used for facilities, but also used in M&A processes. Another area which I think has taken quite, really, significant growth is marketplaces. So whether that's, contract labor like Rig Up, rental equipment like Hitched, consumables and analytics like Go Expedite. There is a growing number of marketplaces, and these marketplaces allow labor to be best valued and have access to the biggest the better buyer of their skill set, and also allow for buyers like corporations, companies, upstream companies to access the best equipment at the best price, get the rental equipment to the site as fast as possible, reduce the number of invoices. So really reduce the labor force and equipment and rental sort of management and interface, and make that really streamlined and efficient. Another area that I'm seeing significant amount of investment is real-time analytics, and whether that's looking at a fantastic company like Corva, who started from scratch and prior to the crisis was on 25-30% of the rigs, and I imagine they continue to have a leadership position, but really look at ways to optimize the use of data. I think that is another very interesting area. And you've had some more, some not simpler, might not be the right way to say it, but, just even the ability to, develop software such as Inside Petroleum or Q Engineering, which was recently purchased by Drilling Info. allowing, data to be manipulated easier. When you think about the fact that prior to some of these softwares being developed, we were using Aries and Ph.D. Win for like 20, I mean, before I entered the industry, certainly. But, when I talk with people with grayer beards and more wisdom, they were using it, they've been using it for 30 years. So, there's a lot of opportunity to optimize the information we have and be able to manipulate it with much better software, like as an example, Inside Petroleum, or get real-time data from the field like Corva. And then the final sort of area that I think about is ESG and whether that's cleaner chemicals, like removing iron sulfate with a biocide from water, using sort of cleaner chemicals, or it's figuring out ways to monetize carbon, like Crusoe Energy or Semvita. These are, I think that's another area. There are a significant number of funds, both in terms of, capital that, look to be deployed around both ESG and marketplaces. I think the other two I mentioned, sort of real-time analytics and drones, are a little more, they have, at least from my perspective, have smaller TAMs. But, that's some of the areas you're seeing. And look, when you think about the large diversified companies and you think about oil field services just broadly, right, just take as an example a pressure pumping fleet, or take as an example a land rig. I mean, these are extremely capital intensive pieces of equipment. As an industry, the oil field service sector has just been pounded and pounded for a very long time. And so what makes it difficult is for these guys to, these companies to, create value just based on that capital equipment, because, as upstream companies are forced to create cash flows, one of the best levers was to put pressure on oil field service companies. So really, when you think about some of the things like HMP is talking about, or you see it across the land drillers, Patterson, Ensign, Precision, they all talk about, sort of an evolved business model where they get to add value products, whether it's aftermarket services or analytics or automation, is becoming increasingly important. And then, if you look at the large diversifieds, I'm sure some of you have worked there, looking at the pivot of companies like Schlumberger and Baker Hughes in particular, where they, Baker Hughes talks about its digital solutions business a lot, its industrial Internet of Things, their partnership with C3 AI. And, you can comment on each one of their ventures, but there is a potential future, right, where essentially like every piece of capital equipment is just dumb iron, right? And it's people and it's analysis or technology or AI that sort of remotely controls this equipment. And that's where we sort of see this incremental, returns and cash flow generated because of the ability to understand things better real time and make changes in the field to get the most out of wells. Look, I'll stop there, Dr. Nash. I could probably go on for a long time and on different things, but excuse me, I wasn't able to prepare, so I'm just talking about what some of the things I know, and hopefully that was helpful.
Oh, extremely. And those categories are very helpful in knowing that there are funds that are ready to deploy capital in those different categories. So what we can do is I'll try to have maybe you and I can have a little conversation. I could write down the notes and make them available after.
Sure.
Yeah.
Happy to.
That we can, so we'll recap. I was taking notes, but it's always better to reality check. But talking about those areas, some of them were a little bit surprising, and I thought, well, that's very interesting that there's demand for due diligence where we're now seeing drones. And then,
I mean, you think about it, right? So you can't
Mhm.
leave the house, right?
Right.
And tech, in most, right, in a lot of cities, a lot of offices have them opened up, but you're in the middle of buying a great asset, or trying to figure out if the asset's actually great. The seller or the operator, the service providers, all the contractors at the field or the manufacturing plant, they don't want excess people walking around, right? So how do you enable? Obviously, you can do things like we've always done this, like virtual data rooms, but interesting Schlumberger's Delphi technology allows you to essentially get physical geomaps online, which I think when I worked at Equinor, that was impossible. Every time we did a deal, we'd have to go to some room in some building and look at the maps and run some models, whereas this allows you to do that. And then, I think that's going to become much more prevalent.
Well, it's just it's interesting because I like for example, after Harvey, lots of drones were doing inspections on like roof flooding, et cetera. But now just putting it in taking it like an order of magnitude higher. That's interesting. Well, this is a really good segue to Sudhir Pai. So we're fortunate to have this, and this will resonate, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. Sudhir, I'll get your, I'll share the screen. I'll stop sharing. Whoops.
Thank you, Susan. And while you bring up the presentation, I want to thank you for and AAPG and Tulsa Society to give us this opportunity to present.
You're quite welcome. I'm searching for it.
Okay.
Go ahead and talk about the Houston Technology, the Collaboration Center a little bit while I'm finding this.
Sure. So in order to ensure, so today's presentation is going to be just a little bit of introduction into what's the Technology Center, etc. I know a little bit of what I will talk to support a lot of the listeners today or participants who did not participate in the earlier talk a couple of weeks ago. I'll give a quick background and then I'll follow it up with a few interesting things to make sure our friend like Munira, who is calling in from England, does feel that there are other new diverse things that she'll see in today's presentation. The Technology Collaboration Center is a 501c organization based out of Houston, Texas, which looks at how the various industries. It was formed in 2015 to look at how the various industries which are in Houston in general, but particularly energy capital of the world, space capital of the world, particularly now with everything that you've seen happening last week with the space vehicle from SpaceX and NASA going up to the International Space Station, which we are extremely proud and excited about. And also the fact that very few people know that there are more doctors in 1 square mile called the Texas Medical Center, or TMC here in Houston, with the Methodist Hospital, the MD Anderson Center, and Memorial Hermann, UT Health, etc., all based there within that 1 square mile. So the idea was to try and see, and I quite liked some of the opening statements that you made, Susan, which jive extremely well with this particular topic that I'm going to present at, particularly in the current time. How do we try and see that we've shared enough, I think, within the energy industry. But when we look outside, we see that there are other industries which are doing similar kind of things, which can be shared. So again, I know we have 10-15 minutes on today's talk, and it's a very interesting and it's a large topic. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at my email address, sudhir@autoenergy.com, or connect up with LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to answer any further questions which might.
I'm assuming that you can see the slide, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's a relief.
Yeah, I can see that. You can move to the next one.
Okay, perfect.
So the key missions of the it has not moved, Susan. You might want to move. Yeah, thank you. So very quickly, the mission is to be a premier organization to solve significant technical challenges with the greatest societal impacts. And in particular, in current times, the societal impacts is a key aspect. To partner across the industries, I mentioned the 3 industries, but then if you can see a lot of other industries like automation, manufacturing, etc., and particularly things like the Port of Houston, being one of the most important ports, not only in the United States, but in the world, also gives us an opportunity to expand beyond these three industries. It's a member-driven organization, so we have large organizations like Schlumberger, Shell from the energy side, Jacobs, Geocontrol, KBR, NASA, Johnson Space Center from the space side, Baylor College of Medicine from the health side, as members of this organization, trying to kind of get together. Yeah. On to the next one, please, Susan. So as we start to look at this, there are quite a few ways that we engage with the community through collaboration concierge service, through various workshops, through which come on. Also, we have on-site seminars. On-site seminars are kind of litmus test to find out if a particular strategic theme that we might take, does it have the legs to go ahead and become a full-fledged theme or not. So sometimes when we want to find out if we do want to go and spend the time, resources, and efforts into an important theme, should we go or not? We test it with on-site seminar, and a very successful on-site seminar we conducted late last year, wherein for the first time, 3 experts from those 3 fields, healthcare, space, and energy, got together. And I can tell you, in my entire career, it is one of the finest seminars I've attended, because you had 3 experts getting together who knew enough about the successes and the technology that they had in their own field, but had not ventured out to see what exists outside, right? There is a very popular saying which exists, and I try and quote it whenever I can, and that is, a lot of times the answers to your problems are in the neighbor's toolbox. And it was loud and clear as we saw it there. So on the basis of that, for 2020, we have decided on some very strategic themes. Yeah. And those themes are coming up in the next slide. So imaging is going to be one of the themes. We've called it generically platform of the future. So it is, for example, in the energy business, it's the rig of the future, but the similar kind of technologies can you look at and apply to what is going to happen down the road, not only on Mars, but Johnson Space Center's interest to try and see what can happen at Mars, etc. And not forgetting what's going to happen on the moon through the Artemis program. So Susan, next slide, please. So you have the strategic themes like imaging, wearable technology, and originally this is how it had started when NASA got involved in it, to try and see how we can invite industry experience all the way from large companies to medium companies to startups coming in and presenting their technologies. Beyond that, and finding the success of what we've seen through imaging and through wearable technologies, we've picked up sustainability through the carbon footprint, water conservation, and AR/VR, particularly related to healthcare, and board members from these various organizations are taking a lead on this to ensure that there is leadership and commitment to each of these. So these are strategic themes, and beyond the strategic themes, based on a few interests which come up from the industry, they can go on the Technology Collaboration Center website and say, hey, we need some help. So the ad hoc technology and business case concierge service, this particular thing which are looking at methane monitoring, looking at what sensors and what detection technologies are available outside, was a question which was posed to TCC. So sometimes what we become is with the network that we've started to develop, very quickly you can engage with the industry to see in very short time how you can collect. Yeah. So what I have done in the next 3 slides is taken 3 case studies, one in energy, one in healthcare, and one in space medicine, to try and see how we will take this ahead. So this particular one is, I was very closely associated with this while I was at Schlumberger. So I spent pretty much all my career at Schlumberger, one of those classical persons, straight out of university. So I did my electrical engineering from University of Bombay, joined Schlumberger, and then stayed with Schlumberger for all of my initial career. So 9 different countries, 26 different positions, etc. This particular case study that you see is, you'll find it in the Heart Energy's ENP magazine, even though it was published and it was published as a cover story based on the presentation which was done at that year's OTC. It was in the September 2017 version. You can find more details there. And I have just about a minute to explain what is happening here. On the left side, you have the traditional way of doing a wide azimuth survey with vessels on a seismic survey. The central one, which you see, was using unmanned systems and collecting data from places where you cannot have seismic data. Like on the left side, you see below the rig, the lack of data there. And that's purely because that's a place where it is a zone in which you cannot enter, purely because of the fact that the streamer survey has 10-kilometer long streamers, whereas the unmanned systems with seismic sensors behind it can go within the 500-meter extrusion zone. In fact, in this particular case, they were as close to a structure as possible, which was just about 100 meters, or even less when you look at the fact that that they are rotating in a figure of 8 within that 500-meter extrusion zone. So you see the data in the center, and what you see on the right side is the merged data from the left and the center processes collected. So 2 very different ways of collecting data, but you can merge them together to give you an answer which is much better than what has ever been done before. And for me, stepping back, one of the best lessons to be learned here is the fact that while this is happening within the energy industry, with other industries like medical industry, etc. So I started as a wireline engineer in Schlumberger, and you do imaging from pretty much day one when you join the organization. The only difference is you don't image human bodies, which is what the surgeons do. But we are like the doctors of the oil and gas industry, imaging the subsurface of the earth and trying to find out how you can use things like FMI and FMS, formation microscope imager, to collect thin bed data from the oil wells. So the technology is similar to the MRI techniques which are used in the healthcare industry. And to some extent, you can see that now. We can move to the next slide, which talks more about the what is how the Technology Collaboration Center has been the conduit to try and solve a problem. So NASA Johnson Space Center through JPL had brought out a ventilator challenge and was requesting the group there, and the group there is called Vital. You see that ventilator intervention technology accessible locally, was trying to see how they can go into the industry, look at US companies who can be selected to license this particular technology, which was developed at JPL. To cut a long story short, the TCC advertised it. Quite a few companies applied, and we are happy to note that the company called Stark Industries LLC that you see as the second company up there was one of the 8 companies who was awarded the license to go ahead and develop the ventilator design. So a success story, you can Google and you'll find more information on the website. But this is fresh news, as you can see. It's on the May the 28th up here. So almost prepared so that I could share this information here. Again, almost everything that I'm sharing here is public knowledge, and I kept it public knowledge so that anybody who wants to go further and find out, I'm pointing it to the right places that you can go and find it. So the ventilator challenge is just one challenge. There are lots of other challenges which come up, and we push these out, and we take a coordination position in these through the technology center. The third one is, this is very interesting. This is being led by the Baylor College of Medicine. I want to thank them for giving me this opportunity to present it at today's talk. And that is with all of the space flights which are coming up, very soon, the space tourism and all that is going to be going to come up, particularly after the success we've seen of the launch last week. Baylor College of Medicine has been a particular part of Baylor College of Medicine, and the gentleman who is leading this is also on the board of BCC, is looking at various hazards which are there in this human space flight. And it's very interesting. The 5 key hazards that they have picked out, surprise, surprise, are similar hazards that we see in the oil and gas industry in an offshore environment. That is being away from land for periods of time, being in isolation confinement areas, hostile closed environment, radiation effects when you use radiation, particularly for logging, etc. That I have used, how to use it very safely. How do you make sure that the radiation equivalent human being monitors are there and you know how to monitor it, etc. And then of course, gravity fields are not there, but then there is a lot of work which is done where in ROV divers go underwater and what kind of effects they've seen, etc. So here we are looking at ways wherein people from 2 very different environments, one looking below or on the surface of the water and another going up in space, have similar kind of effects, and how can you share the lessons learned between each other. Yeah. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. I think I went over by a couple of minutes, but hopefully we find that here are places where things are, a lot of things are common, and a lot of things are there. So sometime later this year, taking the example of the on-site seminar, which is imaging, we are going to have a full-fledged workshop wherein we'll try and see how we can take further the lessons learned from in respect of imaging between these 3 industries can be shared together. It's very interesting that in recent times, almost $2.5 billion has been spent in imaging research, roughly $1.7, $1.8 billion in the healthcare side, and about 700K in in the energy side, particularly majority of it on the seismic side. But at that particular on-site seminar, we found out that very little out of that 1.8 billion on one side and 700K of another side of research has been shared between each other. And this is one such step to make sure that we start to share this. And just like how Susan had said right at the beginning, is a way to make sure that we learn from each other and take this to the next step. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, I really appreciate that, Sudhir, and we've shared your information so people can contact you and find out how the Houston Technology Collaboration Center can help them, and the different programs. So that will be extremely helpful as well.
Sure, and you don't have to be a large organization, you don't have to be a medium organization, etc. There are various ways that you can join in. More than 100 members have joined in individually as individual members by themselves. So we've kept it fairly open for people to come in and join. And there are a lot of members who have continued year on year because they do see value in the fact that we stay pretty much very up to date with what's happening in general, but particularly what's happening in the Houston ecosystem. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you, Sudhir, and that's a great transition to our next presenter, Sunil Garg, and I'm going to make you a co-host so you can share your screen. And if you want to unmute yourself and put on your camera, that would be good too.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Okay, so am I able to share the screen now?
You should be able to. I'll stop sharing.
Okay. I don't see anywhere to share actually.
You kind of have to mouse over.
Yes,
It
is.
because it was at the top instead of the bottom, but
Yeah,
you finally found it.
Yeah, it is coming through.
So Sunil is going to talk to us about how they have pivoted during this pandemic.
So are you able to see my screen, Susan, now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Susan, for giving me the opportunity to present here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sunil Garg, and I'm the founder and CEO of a startup called DataVedik. We are based in Houston. We are a data analytics, big data, and machine learning startup. But really, our expertise is in building what we call as end-to-end data ecosystems. And this is critically important now because our industry has changed a lot, because we are focusing on primarily upstream oil and gas industry, and everybody knows the state of that industry now, right? Both because of COVID-19 and because of the oil prices going down. So that part of, what I consider as really our goal as well as our expertise, people didn't used to pay that much attention to that when I used to present before. Now that becomes highlighted a lot. Yep. The second vertical that we focus on, which lots of people who know me from the oil and gas background and don't know about this, is the healthcare industry. And I will speak a little bit more about that, why healthcare and oil and gas. So this is what we are building. So we are building what I call as a hyper-converged data and analytics platform. And the whole purpose of this platform is to enable the rapid development, deployment, delivery, and essentially full life cycle management of machine learning based solutions. The idea is to realize the value out of the machine learning solutions early enough in the life cycle. So essentially, time is of critical essence here. In my past experience, a lot of the machine learning solutions have been failing in general, primarily because we could not get the value out of those solutions fast enough. By the way, my background before I started DataVedik, I worked pretty much like Sudhir said, I worked pretty much with Schlumberger as well, 21 years, all dealing with data. So 15 years building data management products, another 3 years running global data management business for Schlumberger, and 3.5 years, basically, you can say establishing and running the first machine learning group out there. So that's basically was my background before I started DataVedik. So by the time we started this venture, of course, I fully understood the value of data. And for me, that was, that focus was basically important in terms of starting this startup. Here is our traditional pitch. This is the pitch that lots of people have seen. This is also the pitch that I very recently presented at the Rice Alliance Energy Tech Day, right? And the pitch was all around improving operational efficiency. And the first, I would say, area or the vertical or the business workflow that we focused on was the drilling operations, optimizing the drilling operations. Okay? There's no dearth of machine learning companies who are trying to do this kind of thing, which is optimizing the drilling operations. But one of our main focus and goals was also reducing the carbon footprint. Okay? I will speak a little bit more about that and why that becomes important even now. And from a horizontal platform perspective, this is our bigger picture of that. Okay? I can tell you that in last 4 months, I have been presenting to a lot of investors, and all they wanted to see was that first slide. They all wanted to see we are focusing on one little workflow, one little business segment. Okay? That has changed completely in the last 1 month. Now, whenever I present, people look at this with curiosity and they look at this with great attention. And the reason for that is, if you focus completely on drilling, you already know where the market is going today, right? And if you were focused on land drilling, then there is no market essentially. Right? Pretty much that market has disappeared, right? So for us, the focus was on building a broad horizontal platform, and on the top of that platform, building what I call as content or machine learning apps. Drilling optimization was the first one we focused on, but from a research perspective, the other areas that are listed there, we have pretty much something built today in the research lab, something on each one of these areas. Not yet commercialized everything, but something in each one of these areas. The first commercialization was around drilling optimization. And we had just started rolling this solution out in March when COVID-19 hit. Okay? So that's basically what we were trying to build. And the differentiators that we brought to the market in terms of why we would build something like this and how we were positioning it was essentially, I would say, 4 different differentiators. The primary one being a combination of upstream domain expertise, data science, data management, and software development. That's how our team is built. What that allows us to do is to do a seamless integration of E&P domain with data science. And what it translates to, when I say that, because that's a buzzword, but what it really translates to is an end user centric solution where end user, if my goal is that the end user should not even know whether we are using big data, machine learning, data analytics, all those buzzwords and all those technologies behind the scenes. All they care about is, can they use the product reliably to do what they want to do? Okay? And that's what I mean by seamless integration. Another thing where we really distinguish ourselves is in building the scalable, repeatable, and reproducible workflows. What that essentially means is we do not focus on building a specific model with a specific data set. We focus on developing reusable and reproducible technique. Once we have used that with a particular data set, we can reproduce that with any data set essentially. And that is helping us today, again, when I show you how we are pivoting, because lots of initial work we did with the land drilling, the shale data, right? But we developed the technique in such a way that it could be very easily applied to, let's say, conventional fields, offshore fields, deep water fields. All of that, is equally applicable to those. And that has become important in research. Okay. Another differentiator that we brought to the market and is using machine learning itself in combination with the domain knowledge to detect, and not only detect, but correct the data quality issues in an automated manner. Right? And this becomes a very powerful technique because all our work is centered around data. If the data quality itself is poor, that essentially impacts the end result. Okay? And the last part is again important from a user experience perspective. Our expertise is also in integrating whatever we build in the right data and application ecosystem. Reducing, you can say, the learning curve for the end users, whatever platform they are comfortable with. We can bring our solutions and integrate them nicely behind the scenes in those platforms. They can also use our platform completely, right? But we really don't want to force every user to say, go and learn a new platform. That's not what our goal is. Okay. So based on that background, right, I spoke kind of pretty much all about oil and gas and about upstream oil and gas, which is the business that is really right now, very clearly in the dumps, right? I'm pretty sure that will come back. I have full optimism on that. that business will come back. So the way we are positioning ourselves now, and some of these are already ongoing initiatives, is first one, which like I said, the investors wanted to look at only drilling. Okay, they wanted, in fact, they told me, don't even worry about saying completely drilling, give me one workflow in drilling and that's what we should focus on. We, in the research side of things, were already focused on building multiple solutions across the entire well life cycle. This is where we really see our value, and that we have continued to expand. And what we do is we research into a particular area, build a prototype, build an end-to-end workflow around it, and then we start commercializing. So at this point of time, we are in the rapid mode of commercializing each one of the research solutions that we had built. Another thing that we were very focused on, which was not very highlighted, in fact, before, was these reusable tools and techniques. And in the next slide, I will show you some more of this. Okay? Offshore use cases, very clearly, initial models that we built were all built with the shale data, but pretty much all the traction that I've gotten in last couple of months is all offshore companies. They are saying, can we use your techniques offshore? Because offshore projects are longer term projects and they are really not that greatly impacted by the current situation, right? They continue to invest in this. Of course, everybody wants to save money, right? But lots of our solutions are essentially focused around saving money anyway. Okay? Another area where we have recently stepped into is renewables. This has always been a goal, at the back of when we started the company, that we want to step into that, but we really didn't step into that very early. So we have started focusing on this recently. We haven't made any public announcements around this. We have something right now being cooked in the research lab that ultimately we will announce. So as of now, it's mostly in the stealth mode. Okay. Next vertical, which you remember was in my first slide, which was the healthcare industry. So pretty much in all my presentations, that part I used to ignore because a lot of my presentations were to the oil and gas people. But this is essentially the background from which my co-founder comes from. And we already have some healthcare clients who are wanting to use our technologies. In fact, the very first client whom we are talking to, they actually looked at our oil and gas workflows, and believe it or not, they actually understood what we were doing, right? Which was for me actually a great satisfaction because when I presented to them, I kept on thinking, it's probably a waste of time because they will not understand what we are really trying to do. So they could not only understand, but they could relate to what could be done in healthcare around the same things. Next part, which is not really a new focus. Okay, so some of these are not really new focus. These were all already running, except for that we didn't use to highlight. But automation is a very key part of what we build in our solutions. And that is helping us a lot just in terms of our internal efficiency. So it was not only automating our own solutions, but automating our own internal development work. And at this point of time, when there is a huge focus on conserving cash, right? So this becomes a very critical for us. Another initiative that we have had running for quite some time is all around education and training opportunities. This is lesser a revenue generating opportunity. So we don't use it for really, generating a huge amount of money or revenue. We use it for spreading the knowledge in any industry, including oil and gas industry. My past experience has been a lot of people are attracted towards machine learning and big data analytics, but lots of them, first thing, they don't know what it practically means and what it will give to them. Second is they really don't understand the value of data. They also don't understand the value of data management when they want to use data analytics and machine learning. So all the education and training services that we have are all focused around that. And we don't really charge money for every one of these. For some cases, we do charge money from corporations, we do charge money, but lots of these are essentially philanthropic initiatives, just for spreading knowledge. Okay? And that could be anybody, including, let's say, the fresh grads from the universities or people who are still at the university. We have done that as well. We have done that as part of AAPG before as well. Lots of different sessions that we have done around these trainings. Okay? And that basically has helped us not only in terms of, let's say, spreading our visibility, it has gotten me some very good people actually.
Well, thank you. Oops.
Yeah, and Susan was one of the critical persons in kind of, doing and organizing this for us as part of AAPG. Okay. Another thing which, I want to highlight from our team perspective is that we have a very agile team. Susan, can you still hear me?
I can. You're kind of out of time.
Okay, yeah, 2 more minutes in fact, right? So we have a very agile team which has kind of helped us to adapt to some of these, right? And we still, by the way, continue to recruit. If we find a good person, we would take them in the team. Of course, cash is critical at this point of time. So there is a focus on cash conservation, but I think we can figure out one way or the other of making a person a part of the team if we really like it. Yeah. So just to give you a glimpse of all of these, I said solutions across the well life cycle. There are a bunch of these. Like I said, first focus was on drilling, but lots of these have already been done in our research lab. We are in the process of commercializing this. Okay. What does reusable components mean? This is really the platform, right? That means components around parsing data, loading data, a data store in which we can store the data and retrieve the data at a fast pace. Data management techniques built into the platform, data cleaning service built into the platform. So these are all reusable components. Lots of these we started from oil and gas perspective, but we have so many techniques which are just completely agnostic to the existing. There are more techniques and methodologies.
Sunil, this is really great. Why don't you send me this and share the whole thing with everybody, since we're pretty much out of time for yours. So.
Okay. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, sorry about that. But,
yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
I think I was pretty much close to getting done anyway.
It's
Thanks a lot.
Hard to get through all of those slides in 15 minutes.
So I'm going to stop sharing so that we can hand over to the next person.
That was really good, and I really appreciate you're talking about how during the pandemic you pivoted. We'll talk to Suri Bhat now, and finding you on my screen so you can share. Suri, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. I'm waiting.
There you are. Good. Okay, great. So I'm making you a co-host.
Okay.
And Suri is here with Bluware, and he's also going to talk about what the pandemic has meant and how they've pivoted and how their analytics have changed.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. Can you hear me, Susan?
Yes.
I'll call you Susan. I'll not make it formal as a doctor.
No, this is all good.
Okay. First of all, thanks to AAPG and the Tulsa Geological Society for giving us an opportunity to present today. I work for Bluware, and I'm going to talk today about how we are enabling the workforce to explode in the cloud, actually, under current circumstances that we are facing. And I'll also share an example of how we are enabling that using deep learning, which is a branch of machine learning. So I have while I was listening to the other talks, I said, this is not planned, but I'm going to talk about machine learning applied to seismic surveys, which Sudhir talked about, to reduce costs and increase efficiency, which Arash started with. So somehow or the other, I'm going to coordinate all the three talks into mine. So thanks for setting the stage. Are you able to see the slide? So needless to say, the COVID-19 crisis and the oil prices are causing a rapid shift for geoscientists to work from home or work remotely, and not just geoscientists, anyone in particular. It's accelerating digital transformation. So if you're not already in the cloud, if you've not had a company that's had a leg up in this, you are sort of have to accelerate now because the climate is and the conditions are forcing you to get there. And again, the focus is on cost, and again, reducing time to oil. That doesn't go away anytime for our industry. And for those of you that have been in this for 20, 30 years or more, can relate that, over time, that's been the focus always, and that doesn't go away. So I'll just introduce Bluware very quickly. We are a company that originated from, from the gaming technology, and that is what has helped us build a platform, which is what I'm going to briefly talk about, and how we are helping our clientele pivot, use the technology to pivot in terms of remote data access, in terms of applying learning techniques to this. So I'm not going to, I'll share these slides so everyone has a copy, and I'm going to be respectful of the time that's allocated to us. So again, we are a scientific software platform, and I'm going to talk about seismic data. Sudhir has already gave us an example of how seismic data is being collected. But for a typical oil company, that is the elephant in the room. You know, you have petabytes of data, sometimes up to 85% of this is subsurface data. And the challenge is, how are you going to access this? You know, and in daily workflows, whether using in any interpretation software or anything, you're making multiple copies of this. So one challenge is accessing it. Second challenge is how do you deal with copies? How are you actually reducing the goal has to be reduce the amount of copies and increase their accessibility. And we are talking in petabytes, you know, we're not talking about gigabytes or terabytes. When you look at the overall perspective, it's a lot of data. And this data is available today for companies, and it has to be utilized. This is an investment companies have made, and we are making it easy for them to utilize it and actually get intelligence out of it. So just one of the things we always hear is, oh, we are a cloud enabled company. We can move this to whether it's a private cloud or a public cloud. But the challenge becomes if you take a file-based approach, it's still a file-based approach in the cloud. There's no efficiency in how you access the data. And that itself is a bottleneck. And a lot of customers that I've talked to don't like to be surprised by the cloud bills or the cloud cost. You know, whether you get a bill from GCP, Azure, or AWS, one fine morning, you're like, oh, how did this happen? So what we have done is we have a technology that has allowed us to take segwis, for example, in this case, and break them into cloud native format. So what we're seeing here is a serverless API access to segwi or seismic data in the cloud. So this allows customers to bring only what they need onto their daily usage instead of having to access the entire segwi file, which is what is happening across the board. So a cloud native object-based format that allows adaptive streaming. So I'm going to spend a little bit time on the concept of what we mean by adaptive streaming. I don't know how many of you know what those tapes on the left are, but for those of you that have been around long enough, you know, we started with those VHS tapes, then we went to those smaller CDs, DVDs, and then now, you know, Hulu, Netflix, and YouTube have changed the way we watch movies, and that's the same experience we are bringing to the seismic data. So you should be able to just turn on any application and be able to access that seismic data from wherever you want to. One of the things that I wanted to also say is when you watch YouTube or Netflix depending on the device and the bandwidth and the latency, it's optimized for that particular scenario. You know, when you're watching it on your iPhone, it's optimized for that. When you're watching it on your computer, it's optimized for that. If you have a 4K monitor, it's optimized. We are bringing that same experience to seismic data, because again, as I said, our background is in the gaming technology, and that is what we have applied here. And one of the things that for those of you that have kids that play Fortnite, or maybe some of you play Fortnite too, you cannot have so many users and have to wait for a lag. You know, when you're either shooting someone or you're hiding from someone, it has to be real time when you have so many users access their data simultaneously. So that is the importance of getting data into a cloud native object format, which can enable users to have that streamlined experience. And by adaptive streaming, what I mean is you only bring what you need to. You don't need to bring the entire data set. You can only bring what you need. Just a fact, I was asking my 13-year-old son, said, how many Fortnite users are there? And he said in 2020, about 350 million users. So, I mean, we don't have those kind of users for seismic data, but I think the size is enormous enough for us to at least consider that technology in terms of how you can access data remotely and use it under the given latency and bandwidth that's offered to you. I'm going to spend a few minutes just a couple of minutes on this slide to make a point as to what we mean by adaptive streaming or adaptive compression. On the very left here, the legacy format is SegWi. And then typically what we have seen customers do is they have a fully lossless version of that, which is at a 25% reduction of the original size. They use it for preservation. But then if you start looking at the middle column here, which is virtually lossless, you can take that 100% and go down to almost 20 or 30% of their original size and serve it on the cloud. And once you have that one copy in the cloud, everything to the right becomes an adaptively streamed copy. You are not making, it's not a copy, you're adaptively stream what you need from the left to the right. So depending on the user experience, whether you're trying to use a visualization, whether you're trying to process, if you're trying to do something on the imaging side, you only bring what you need. And that is the key concept behind adaptive streaming. Benefits, you store one version of the data set, deliver the signal quality that you need to. And as you can see, the example here is up to 9 gigabytes per second on cloud, which is really, really fast. So in this case, again, the point being, when customers have worked remotely, and for customers or companies that have already pivoted to the cloud, this becomes very natural, because for them, bringing it into a cloud format and allowing their users globally to access that seismic data is invaluable, especially in the given circumstances. So this is where I think we are helping from the pivoting aspect in terms of allowing users to work remotely and allowing them, giving them the benefit of only bringing what they need to from the original data set. I'm going to give one example and on machine learning, and this is going to be the last topic that I'm going to talk about today. So we have a deep learning implementation where traditional deep learning on the top is a batch process. So for those of you that are data scientists or even geoscientists who have spent time on deep learning, typically you need to take that SegWi file, you need to slice and dice it, create images, random images, and feed it to something like TensorFlow or another PyTorch or whatever it is to get your machine trained so that you can start inferencing. In our case, what we are doing is we are eliminating all the steps from 2 to 3, 2 to almost 5, allowing random access from the original data set, adaptively streamed for machine learning. I'm going to share a 2-minute video, and that's going to be the last thing that I'm going to talk about today. So hopefully we'll give you some time back, Susan. So in this case, can you see the video? So in this case, we have a deep learning toolkit where we are interpreting faults. This is about 4,500 square kilometers. And what we're demonstrating here is geoscientists is fully controlling the entire interpretation process with the machine, with deep learning. So instead of the beauty about this is the geoscientists are in control, and even complex faults can be inferred by the machine. And in this case, the yellow ones are the ones that the machine has predicted. The green ones are the ones that the interpreters are teaching the machine. And the machine is learning live. And as you can see, you can get surfaces that you have generated by the machine live. No data preparation. You can use what's available in the cloud, single source of truth. So compared to traditional 2 to 3 months, this could be achieved in 8 hours. So we're talking about drastic efficiency savings. So in this case, this is an existing example of a commercial offering that a couple of super majors have already picked up on, that they're using to, as an enabler for all their interpreters. So it goes back to, reducing cost, increasing efficiency drastically, and optimizing the use of data, which Arash pointed out to very early. So that's all I had to talk about today. Thank you very much. And this is my last slide. Key takeaways, if I know it's a little bit of after 8, but key takeaways is data should be accessible from anywhere, anytime, even if you're working from your home or your garden or the beach, it doesn't matter. Use and stream only what is needed. Let's be efficient and let's make it efficient here. Let's optimize what's given to us. Make use of the cloud. All of us are on the cloud today. Zoom is on the cloud. We are actually using cloud technology. Why not use it to our advantage? Then last but not the least, let's make the machines work for us. And so that's all I had, Susan. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's attention late in the day. And again, my contact is available here if you want to talk to me or have any other questions.
This is really fascinating. And I think what I like about it is that you've managed to do it in a way that it has all the capabilities of the really expensive platforms, but you can use it with basically access it from your laptop.
Absolutely. You can access it from your laptop. You can access it. In fact, if you have an iPad, you can use the touchscreen on the iPad to pick your faults or salt using a pen if you wanted to. So we made it that easy and accessible.
Wow. Yeah, that's just so enabling because it allows people to be creative and really, like, I'm thinking of an application, and this applies to Sunil as well. I mean, let's say that you have an opportunity to evaluate some acreage that, as Arash was talking about, people are desperate for generating revenue or cash. So they're selling some properties. How do you evaluate it? Then this gives you a chance to at least review the property in a new way instead of just looking at the same old.
Yeah, and with the experts in control, I think the point here is that the interpreters are in control. The data scientists are helping with the plumbing, but what's happening is the interpreters get to see if the results match what they are seeing. And this is happening live. This is not sort of a batch process that takes days or weeks. So that is the beauty about the interactive part here.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, Sunil, I feel kind of bad. I think you had a last slide. So you want to share your screen if there's a slide that your last slide you didn't get to?
Sure, Susan. So that's what I wanted to show to people as the last closing slide, which is in fact 2 slides actually. This is how all our solutions are built. This is how they look like in terms of the data flow, data to decision basically. Okay, starting with data to an end user app where end user does not need to know anything about what technology sits behind the scenes. Okay? And this is essentially powered by 2 things. The first part, which is everything else except for the end user app, is an automation framework. Everything is automated, including, by the way, the generation of the UI and the dashboards. Everything takes place in this automation framework. And then the end user app is essentially a standalone app that an end user can use. So that is basically the pattern of all our solutions today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And then we have a question from the audience for Suri. Don't know if you, whoops, what? Okay, so Wei-Ming Lee has asked, hi Suri, how does your deep learning algorithm perform on training, development, validation, as well as testing data? In addition, how does this cloud-based workflow perform compared to conventional workflow regarding accuracy?
Great question. In this case, the point to note is that we are expediting the whole experience and we're expediting the interpretation process by allowing the machine to do most of the job. So all the repetitive tasks, as you saw, by the time you interpreted 2 to 3%, the entire volume has been interpreted for you. So the control lies with the interpreter, and the quality of the interpretation depends on the interpreter himself or herself. So in this case, customers have actually used this on surveys, and once they're happy, that is when they stop. So we've seen 2 to 3%, max maybe 4 or 5%. So in this case, the training and the inference is happening simultaneously. So the beauty about this, this innovative technology is both of that helps simultaneously. Traditionally, what happens is you do your training, then you have an inference, then you get an output, then you do your quality control. But in this case, all that is happening simultaneously while you're interpreting, and which is why the quality control happens instantaneously. And it's up to the interpreter himself or herself to determine if they're satisfied or not with that. Does that help? And then we can take some of this offline too. I don't want to just take the entire time here.
Well, there's a question that was for Sunil. That's very helpful. And I'll go back. It's just a quick one. Muniro was asking Sunil if they were affected by Google's backing out of building customized AI and machine learning for oil and gas startups.
Sorry, I was muted. No, we are not really impacted with the Google decision, because all our solutions are built in a way where they're all cloud agnostic. We can in fact run them in any cloud. Today we have a combination, in fact, of solutions running in AWS and Azure, but yeah, we don't really care. Also, we use TensorFlow quite extensively for our deep learning neural networks. And I don't think that support is going to stop. So that will continue to evolve anyway. But we really are not dependent in any way on a particular, let's say, Google technology at this point of time.
Thank you. That's really good. So Hugh Winkler has a question for everyone, or wanted to ask a question of Arash. So go ahead, Hugh.
Hi, Susan. This is Hugh. Yeah, I had a question that was a little bit too unfocused to be able to type it in into the chat. Arash, I just wanted to invite you to expand a little bit on the concept of cost cutting, and also related maybe as automation, and what do you think it takes for a company to invest in cost cutting? They have to spend money up front to save money in the long or medium or short term. And I guess it's the same real question for automation, but maybe cost cutting and automation are on different scales. So do you have any thoughts along those lines?
Arash, you're muted.
That's a good question, Hugh. I'll try my best to answer, but given you said your thoughts were a little all over the place, that's my exit if I can't. What I would say in terms of cost cutting, unfortunately, one of the biggest components of cost cutting is people, right? It's reducing the number of people and reducing and at the same time making those people more efficient. So increasing, their efficiency by reducing the number of tasks they do. So, from my perspective, often where we see a lot of synergies in a transaction is through reduction of SG&A, so management compensation and reduction of costs more broadly. You see it through increased, efficiencies in field operations. So increasing basin density, getting cost efficiencies through scale. And so more negotiating power with the supply chain. And then, as a third, you have, expansion of the value add. So from a cost cutting perspective, I think it's really sort of focused on reducing the number of tasks, I think, and reducing the head count. And so when you see a lot of these data technologies, I used to work at Equinor, and the process of planning and developing an asset would take, 3 to 6 months. And, for a company that's, as far as I'm considered, is quite sophisticated. And so when you're able to streamline using things like Bluware or, other technologies, able to streamline and instead of like spending the first of that 3 to 6 months, the first, month of it, just gathering data and understanding what the data is that you're gathering, is having that data already in place, organized, and instead people could spend their time on what they should be doing as engineers and geoscientists, which is interpreting that data and providing, utilizing what we ultimately actually pay them for, which is mastering, their mastery of a skill set. So I think from a cost efficiency perspective, that's what I see, reduction of people and reduction of tasks, and really using the people you have for value add. The second part of your question was automation. So there's like little things you can quickly, one of the things I think people need to really have into perspective, and I get this a lot from people outside of oil and gas, is the oil and gas industry is extremely antiquated from some perspectives. I know we drill, when I say this to people that have worked offshore, they chase me out of the room. But, I know we have some of the most complicated subsea trees in the world and some things that you could put on space. And look, I get it. But from a, I'll make some specific examples so you know what I'm talking about when I say it's antiquated. Just think about, for those of you that worked in the field, how many times have you got some sort of delivery of a field product and the guy signs it on paper, or the woman or man signs it on paper, and takes that paper, takes it to the field, like the field office, the trailer, faxes it to Houston or Oklahoma. Then that person in Oklahoma or Houston then takes it and types it in SAP. And then by the time it's actually in the system, it's already, the well's drilled, it's completed, it's been producing for 3 months. So you really have no ability to track the costs of that well, as an example. Another example, this was from an automotive, a peer that worked in the automotive industry. A lot of people have cars today that the engine shuts off when it's idled, right? Like, how many pressure pumping fleets or land rigs actually shut off, right? Like when you're not using them, when you're not using one of the engines, it doesn't just shut off. So, that's a very these are simple things you can automate, from having a tablet that you could scan things in and process back to, in terms of cost tracking, or reduce the consumption of fuel in a pressure pumping fleet. And then sort of the next level is really sort of having information like Bluware or Verdec, really provide direction to the equipment and tell them. And I've seen examples of this as one in Corva, which is this, which is a analytics platform. And unfortunately, I haven't seen some of the ones that presented today, but telling a rig exactly where to drill the well. Or you've seen it, HMP's got some software and technology developed, as well as Patterson, where, takes away some of the decision-making from the person on the pad, and really presents the person on the pad with the best alternatives based on the information that's being fed to the software platform. So I think there are different levels of automation, and there are different ways to take costs out, but ultimately all that needs to be done in order for companies to generate free cash flow, which is what people need in order for this to be an investable sector.
That was great. Well, thank you. Excellent answer. So Aaron has a question for everyone. And Aaron has been here since the very beginning, and he's doing a lot of things with 3D printing. And I just wanted to say that next week we're focusing on smart manufacturing, and we'll include some 3D printing and things like that.
Nice. Just out of the last 5 weeks, I've noticed a very common theme of reducing the tasks of individuals through some kind of efficiency gains, whether those are computers or drones or whatever. And just coming from the service sector, I've seen numbers of like Schlumberger laying off to over 80,000 people now. And we're trying to consolidate those gains by getting rid of more people. And so instead of like looking towards ways to get rid of more people, how do we look at getting more people involved, maybe not in the same tasks, but get those 80,000 people back to work? Because a very common, or one analogy I like to look at is if you look at some of the World War II videos, is they're sending out letters and there's like 100 people in a room with typewriters and they're typing that away. And now you don't even need that. You've got one printer that'll print all those and put 100 people out of work. So now we're trying to make that even more to the group. Where do we see all these people going in the future, and how do we work towards getting people back into work, and what are some of those prospects that we're looking at?
Well, I have some ideas, but I'll let other people jump in.
So maybe let me speak a little bit about that, Aaron. So one of the things, in fact, that when I was presenting, the point I was raising about education and training, right? So all these people who are losing jobs, one way or the other, they have to upskill themselves. They have to reskill themselves. Okay? Because definitely, a lot of these jobs are not going to come back. Maybe some will come back, but not all of these jobs are going to come back. So if they don't reskill and upskill, then essentially it's a lost cause. And that's, I think, hopefully more people will contribute in that direction. But from my perspective, at least that's what my focus is on, education and training opportunities. And like I said, right, we don't necessarily charge for everything. I'm more than happy to help out anybody who thinks, if they really have the fire to reskill themselves, I think I'm pretty sure there will be many people like me who are willing to help basically in that direction. And that's where I think the future is going to be.
Yeah, and training, I think, to what end and where. And one thing that the not so veiled objective of these is to show how people can pivot and have careers in more than one industry. Just pick out the industry that you like and that's emerging. And that might be manufacturing, might be health, might be space exploration. Sudhir talked about that, and Sunil, you talked about bridging. And I see that Mark has an answer. So Mark, you want to tell us what your answer is? This is good. Mark Hamzat.
Yeah, let Mark speak after, and then I'll jump in, Susan.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Mark, are you there?
Yeah. So.
Okay, turn on your camera so we can see you.
Okay, great. Super. Can you see me?
No.
Unable to access camera.
Okay.
I'm not sure. So anyways, I'm out taking a bike ride by the bayou.
Okay. Audio is fine.
This was fantastic. So essentially, if we think about it,
Mark, you need to ride your bike back to where you had good signal.
We're 100 years
Mark, you're intelligible.
From the first industrial revolution, but the second industrial revolution, everyone there were. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes,
okay,
stay there, Mark. Don't ride your bike anymore. Just stay put.
All right, no worries. So we're at the second industrial revolution. 100 years ago, what were the big industries? There were ironsmiths, blacksmiths, et cetera, because people were riding horses. Then the car came along, and there were mechanics, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, so I
Well, Mark, you broke up again.
I think Mark's point. I think Mark's trying to make the
Can you hear
point
me?
that
Yeah, so we have to.
you come in and out, Mark.
Ne-
It sounds like a
Never
bass
mind.
guitar.
But we're at the second industrial revolution, and so just like the first.
Now you've muted yourself.
I think the point Mark's trying to make is that we're going to have basically a new set of, a new set of professionals, right? Like he talked about the blacksmiths. I think that's what he's trying to say. I don't know if everyone agrees with that, but
on a lighter
look, I mean, I'll give you an example, like wind turbine technicians, how much has that grown? You have, secondhand clothing stores, right? Marketplaces. There's people that are verifying these products. I think there's a lot. And I think the first gentleman said it very well. You need to reskill and upskill. Sorry, Suri. I think you wanted to say, Suri.
I was going to say on a lighter note, Mark might be time traveling and he might have actually gone to the second industrial revolution, which is why we're not hearing him.
I like that. Well, Sudhir, what were you going to say? Oh, Sudhir, you're muted.
Oh. So I'll give you my personal opinion to this based on particularly the last few years that I was very closely involved with the use of unmanned systems, etc., and to a large extent the experiences that we learned. And one key one was try and use the technology to make sure you pull humans out of harm's way, right? And reduce the chance, or rather, in fact, I would say our goal should be to eradicate or remove the chance of them being in harm's way, because by doing that, you are removing the exposure of having incidents and of humans being involved in the incidents, in spite of the fact that you'll do everything back in the factory to try and get it right, right? And I just want to touch onto one other point with kind of Arash has made. I think one reason why in the oil and gas industry test is because we have realized over a period of time that the cost of things not going right can be disastrous, right? So to some extent, I think we are an industry wherein a lot of people are paranoid and paranoid for the right reasons, because then you essentially bring out a product that is very well tested out and following things which are used very much in the oil and gas industry, which is getting it right the first time every time, and the fact that failure is not an option, right? So we use these unmanned systems and again, this thing is very public. Feel free to go in and see for Shell in the Gulf of Mexico. I can only talk deep water, only mention that it was in the deep water Gulf of Mexico, where originally data was being collected by having a technician and a human being on the back deck of a boat to go out and collect the data, right? And Murphy's Law, when everything is planned, everything is fine. When you get out, first thing, it's delayed because of an oncoming cyclone or one of these things, and eventually when the and you need the vessel again, the vessel of course is not going to sit because it's an expensive asset. It has been deployed somewhere else. So a lot of times you see the fact that you have to put human beings out there and validate it with the environment is out there, whereas you can use a lot of times unmanned systems who are much better in those times. A lot of these systems work better in the presence of weathers like cyclones and things like that, etc., or doesn't get affected. And in that, what you're doing is not only taking out humans from harm's way, but also absolutely improving the quality of life for those people by reskilling them, upskilling them, and ability to use them in other things. And taking another step back, trying to say that, right, some of these techniques that you are using in oil and gas can also be used in other industries. And then it improves your opportunity to look cross-industry to try and share the experience, but at the same time come to value in a lot of other places. So I don't know, I'm a strong proponent of the fact that a lot of these things which are happening, provided they are done in a right way and understood in a right way, are essentially to give a better opportunity of these people with more opportunities to go out there and better manage this up and down cyclical nature that we are never going to get out in the oil and gas industry.
Oh, yeah.
That's really great, Sudhir, and lots of really interesting points in what you were saying. We have about a minute left, and Evan says he has a point to add if there's time available. So take it away, Evan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess quick background. Obviously, oil and gas industry as a geoscientist since about 2008. So I entered the industry in 2008, and so it's been very, very up and down. And one of the things I think young people can do, and what I was forced to do, is leave the industry temporarily, step out, like work in other sectors with other people, take what you have there, and actually formalize it, try to, not just, live the experience, but bring it with you and try to articulate it. And when you come back into oil and gas, realize that every cycle we were going in and out of, you're basically part of a new way of doing things, right? So don't be shy, don't be apprehensive of trying to introduce your experiences into doing something. And my first boss, some of you may know, John Hogue, I remember he told me at the beginning of my career, he says, I don't need you to do 95% solution, I just need a 75% solution. We'll figure it out from there. And I never understood that till really, really recently. And I think that's where machine learning and AI is going to be really, really great for a lot of people, including young professionals, is that a lot of the work that we do, we can allow these tools to, almost leapfrog up to that, 75% solution, where then we can focus on bringing it up to that next percentage. And how we do that, there's tons of lessons from other industries. And I mean, myself, I picked up and left Calgary after working on an offshore Nova Scotia play to mud logging in the Delaware. And the things I've learned about the industry down here, just from making that lateral career move, has been incredible. And I'm going to hopefully be doing a data science boot camp here soon with Galvanize to upgrade my skills further. And that's the only message I can tell to people who are in their early 30s, late 20s and everything, who are finding themselves in a changing industry, is that you're always in an industry. If you're working, chances are the industry's changing. So don't be afraid to really take the ball and try to, pass it off or lead with it. I mean, everybody's in the same situation very often, and nobody right now, I was doing Mackenzie Delta and, offshore stuff. Then I transitioned, obviously into oil sands and coal and methane, and then well site geosteering, then back to, it just always changes. And it's just a reality. And if you're still working in it, congratulations, don't feel bad and be brave and keep pushing forward.
That's great, Evan. And it's just great insights and words from experience about really transforming. And
Yeah.
I just want to thank everybody for being here. We've gone a little over, but I was having some wrestling gremlins at the beginning, so it took some time. But really like your points, Evan, and I appreciate the enthusiasm for this series. And I want to encourage you to sign up for next week, and you'll be getting some notices from me, even if you cannot attend, because you will get a copy of the recording. So it allows you to say if you have to go in and out or time travel, like like Mark, then you can at least you can watch it again and just share information, share ideas. So next week we're going to talk about smart manufacturing. We're going to have the executive director of Oklahoma Department of Commerce. He's going to talk about some programs that they have available. I'd like to get some other people that are going to be talking about funding availability, and we'll have some examples. So it should be fun. So thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.